Advice for DraftKings and FanDuel, and it is Wild Card Weekend. That's right, 6 games on tap over the next 3 days, and we're here to break it down for you day by day. This video will be the 2 games on Saturday. That's right, we have the Texans and the Chargers. We have the Ravens and the Steelers for seemingly the 100th time this year. But I'm Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy, single game $1 million winner, and I'm joined by Jack, architect of our lineup builder, and multi-time short slate GPP winner. Jack, what's up, man? Good to see you. I'll be seeing you again tomorrow as well. But how you feeling about today's games?
Yeah, not the most excited about them. I mean, I do think we talked through some edges. Yeah, I think I'm looking forward more to tomorrow, to be honest with you. But that's not to say today isn't a good slate. And glad to be here with a live stream with you. It's been a while since we've done one of these.
It has been a while. So Jack and I have been doing the pre-recorded videos, but we're here with a live Q&A for the next 30 to 45 minutes, depending on you guys, the viewers. How many questions you have. Well, you guys will mostly drive the show. We'll go through our typical agenda here where we talk about team by team injuries and maybe some playing time news and notes. Not a ton to go through on that front for this slate. There are no underperforming wide receivers, so no guys there to talk about. But then we'll go through our short slate strategies and then some showdown tips as well at the very end. So if you have questions, throw them in the chat and we will answer them along the way. So we got Finch in here and Amari in here. Amari said, let's win some bread. Let's try to do it today. So Jack, let's start team by team. We'll start with this first game. By the way, first game is at 4:30 Eastern. Second game is at 8 p.m. Eastern. So ideally, we'll get a little 30-minute window there for late swapping. And Jack, if we look at LA and Houston, this is the game with the most injury question marks, or at least injuries in general. Let's start with LA side. Gus Edwards is returning at running back for them. J.K. Dobbins is officially questionable, but he is expected to play. Now, they did call up a running back from the practice squad, so they now have 5 active running backs on the roster. I think it's one of those things, Jack, where it's like they're rewarding him with a playoff game check. Otherwise, I don't know why else they would have 5 running backs on the roster.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen whenever Hill's in, he's like the clear number 2 guy, right? So I think that we can not waste any time like we did the last couple weeks talking about Keaton Mitchell and other random Baltimore backups.
Oh yeah, I was referring to the Chargers actually, the J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards
Oh,
situation.
oh, dude, I like did the thing where Dobbins is like, oh, Ravens.
Oh,
That's
see,
funny.
there we go.
Yeah,
See,
the main guys.
yeah, I would think so too. At receiver for LA, Joshua Palmer is out. Quentin Johnston is questionable, but also expected to play like J.K. Dobbins. And in Palmer's absence last week, Quentin Johnston ran the most routes with 38. Lab McConkey ran the second most at 36. DJ Chark ran 20. A little too late for my best ball teams. I drafted DJ Chark at the end of the drafts back in August. And then Darius Davis ran 12 routes, and they'd like to get him involved when he's on the field. Jet sweeps, pop passes, and he's caught a couple touchdowns in the last month. So, Jack, what do you make of this LA receiving room? I think we all know with McConkey being the chalk, he'll just catch 10 for 100, and these other guys will struggle. But there's some opportunities here.
Yeah, I always want to recheck these guys. So Palmer is mostly an outside receiver, 70%, and Quentin Johnson's very much an outside guy, and I think other not I think is Davis is like a slot guy,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Yep. So yeah, I think and Chark and Johnson seem like interesting plays for sure. They should be getting some snaps out there.
I think so too, as well. And then let's see here. Anything else? Let's talk about the running back snaps just really quickly. And just letting you know, as a refresher from 5 minutes ago, that Dobbins is on the Chargers, Jack. So when Gus and JK have been active together and they both have been quote unquote healthy, Dobbins has basically seen a 70-30 split in favor in terms of snaps. So the question for you is Dobbins obviously has sky high ownership on the 2 game slate. Gus Edwards basically has no ownership. Are we playing Gus Edwards in the 2 gamer if we're building 20 plus lineups? Are you throwing them in there? Or what are your thoughts in general on how we should attack this Chargers backfield?
It's a tough one. I mean, just looking at his price, so he's 5K on FanDuel. Justice Hill's 48. Yeah, I think Jalen Warren's 56. That makes it tough, I
Yeah.
think. Like you'd you'd have to you'd have to trust Gus Edwards. I'll throw it back to you, man. Do you think Gus Edwards can outscore Jalen Warren on either site? At least I don't know what the price difference is over on DraftKings, but I think that makes it tough on FanDuel.
Yeah, just $600 on FanDuel. I mean, Gus Edwards' upside is what, like a Jerome Bettis stat line of like a couple carries for a couple touchdowns, so like 12 to 15
Yeah.
points maximum. And at 1%, yeah, I don't know. If you look at the running back pricing on DraftKings, Gus is 43, and Justice Hill's 45. And Harris and Warren are a little more expensive at 5K and 5,200. So I guess it's a little more understandable on DraftKings because of the pricing. If he can somehow outscore Justice Hill, it seems pretty thin to me otherwise, though.
Yeah, it seems like one of those guys where we talk about like you want to use all the salary and make sure you're not able to upgrade that lineup to someone like that could probably outscore that player. So yeah, I think a large field Hail Mary play is fine, but definitely not someone I'm trying to, jam in on today. I love the backup running backs, but maybe not this one the most.
Well, are you playing guys like Damian Pierce as well, or are we just sticking to Justice Hill and I guess Jalen Warren is the 1B?
Yeah, I think I'm just interested in. I mean, Najee Harris is like 30% owned. Like I don't know. I mean, Pittsburgh's probably just gonna immediately try to run the clock out today and give him the ball like 20 times. So if he lucks his way into a touchdown, yeah, I don't know. I guess the backup Justice Hill seems like the one that makes a lot of sense to try just because he can catch some passes and they have a high total and stuff. So
Yeah, I think
that's
so
where I'm
too.
at.
All right, let's move over to Houston's side. No new injuries, really. The most interesting angle on the entire slate for me, Jack, and you and I haven't talked about this yet, is Houston receivers, and it's Deontay Johnson. So for those of you who played fantasy football, followed the NFL, you know Deontay Johnson, formerly of the Steelers, pretty good fantasy asset, and then was jettisoned, signed by Baltimore, did not work out with Baltimore. Houston picked him up, and he got his first snaps as a Texan last week. Saw a couple of targets, and they were asking the coaches and the players about Deontay Johnson specifically this week after practice going into the playoffs. And head coach D'Amico Ryan said, yeah, we got to feed him the ball in the playoffs. He's a proven player. And basically, we got him acclimated last week, and he's ready to go. And then you hear what Joe Mixon said, and he said, yeah, I mean, I know he's had his struggles this year, but he's came in here and did nothing but work hard. And Jack, when there's uncertainty by the field, is playing John Mechie, is playing Deontay Johnson, Robert Woods, Xavier Hutchinson. To me, this seems like a subjective angle where we can take the coaches and the players' word at face value and get a proven, actual good player at a really cheap price tag.
Yeah, yep, and makes sense. It seems like a great spot. And also when you look at the slot wide distribution, Tank Dell was a very much outside receiver. Deontay Johnson, I want to go look it up, but I think historically he's been an outside guy. And a lot of these other guys, Woods, Mechie, are slot guys. I think Xavier Hutchinson has kind of done both, but bottom line is there's a huge hole on the outside, and he's an outside explosive receiver. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a great spot to. Are you even interested in him as like a single pivot in a small field lineup? Or do you think he's still like just a large field only play? Yeah.
No,
Okay.
I like him in small field too, and I'm hoping this video doesn't get enough people interested and his ownership shoots up. But it's been kind of under the radar. Some projection systems are on him, some are off of him. I don't think he'll be over 20% owned. I would be shocked if he gets that high. And in Showdown as well, he's 3K. It's just because of the uncertainty among all the Houston receivers that he doesn't get that high of ownership.
What that take?
So, all right, guys, if you have questions, throw them in the chat. Jack and I will answer them here along the way. Sean, what's up? Sean has a question. Mixon or Nico for Houston? We just got a straight up 1v1. Typically, we don't answer these types of questions, Jack, but Nico or Mixon, you got to pay up for one of these Houston guys. You feel more comfortable in a single lineup paying for either one.
Um, it's the top. Probably probably Mixon, but yeah, I don't know. I think the running backs are just kind of like worse on today's slate. Mixon and Henry are the two guys that have like very safe opportunities. Like they're getting almost all the opportunities. All these other guys are just kind of not that good. Whereas I think the receivers, there's a lot of pivots. I mean, you just talked about a pivot off Nico Collins, right? Deontay Johnson. So I think it's Mixon for me.
Okay, there you go. I was going to say Nico just because of the ceiling, but I agree with that. Because a lot of times on these short slates, we do have to look at positional allocation. We had a question in our Discord this morning from Jets, who, by the way, longtime member, binked us. I don't know if you saw this, Jack, but he binked us solo Showdown for 10K this past week.
I did see that. Yeah,
Incredible.
love it.
But he was asking, he was looking at the ownership in our model and seeing that there's a lot of tight end ownership today, meaning that the field is going to build a lot of two tight end lineups. And it's hard to argue with the Jack with Zay Flowers being out. We'll talk about here in a second for Pittsburgh for Baltimore. Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, other tight ends that can catch passes, and Dalton Schultz and Pat Fryermuth, and even Will Dissly and maybe even Stone Smart. So I understand it, especially with all the cheaper, trashier wide receivers on the slate. I assume you're just gonna let it fly in your 20 or 150 plus lineup builds as far as flex usage. But do you have any particular thoughts on using tight end or not using tight end in flex today?
Yeah, I don't. Clicking in Will Dissly always just feels really gross. Like I don't want to see any of my lineups, but I mean he is getting the opportunities with the injuries at wide receiver. We've talked about the Baltimore two tight end thing being viable. They continue to get tons of opportunities with no Flowers. You assume when we talked about that, Flowers was in,
Right.
right? Now he's out, so you got to assume that stays up. Schultz again, wide receiver injuries. So yeah, and I think Fryermuth is basically the second pass catcher on that team. So yeah, I think you just let it ride with the tight ends. It does feel kind of gross, but it does seem like all these guys have justifiable reason to get some ownership.
And then we have a question from 16 in the chat. It says, how popular will both Ravens tight end be in the same lineup for single entry? We have Andrews as one of the most popular players, period, at like 30 to 40%. Likely is even less though, Jack, at 15 to 20% depending on the site that you're playing on. So because of that, and maybe people have the same idea, and instead of just multiplying their two ownerships together and thinking that that fraction of lineups will have these two players, it might be a little higher than that because of the correlation and people having the same idea. But I can't imagine more than like 5% of lineups have both Ravens tight ends.
Yeah, that's a good question. Like when you build small field, you're generally trying to make like one pivot, right? Is that a type of thing you would view as a pivot? Like you're like, okay, I don't have any 5% guys, but my construction here is a little bit non-routine, and that's enough to be unique.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing as playing like both Pittsburgh running backs or playing something in that regard. I think those types of double teammates at the same position is a great way to get different.
Okay.
Question here from H Town: Disley, Chark, or Davis if you can only have one. I think for me, Jack, based on the playing time that's opening up with Josh Palmer out, I would choose DJ Chark. But I assume he'll get like 6 targets for 80 air yards and 2 catches, while Darius Davis gets 1 target and a 7 yard touchdown.
Yeah, I'm on Shark too, man. I agree. We'll take the wind sprints and the underperforming guys all day over here, right?
Every single time. All right, let's move on to the late game. Pittsburgh and Baltimore. Pittsburgh, no new injuries. Jack, I feel like we've talked about Pittsburgh like 6 straight weeks on these shows, right? They've been on every
Uh,
slate we've done.
yeah. Ugh.
So we know them. We know what to do. And I think you were on the show last week where I said Najee, the game script favored him a little better last week, and he got the touchdown. I'm not so sure this week as they're back to being double digit underdogs. So I think it's more of a Jalen Warren game, but he sees the ownership as a result.
Yeah, I mean, we can spend a minute on this game because, we have the typical, like, huge favorite rushing quarterback that's going to get tons of ownership. Like, how do you deal with these games, right? It's always tough. I like to think of it as like we don't know what's going to happen, but they've played twice this year, and there were very different outcomes. And I think either outcome could happen, right? Like one of the games, the Ravens just blew them out of the water. The other game was like a super scrappy game that Pittsburgh won, and Najee Harris got a bunch of touches in that game. Now he didn't do a lot with them because he's not an efficient player, but yeah, I mean, I think the ownership is probably, even though it's a gross play, like it's just too low for. They're gonna try to give him the ball. He easily could score zero, right? If they get down. So maybe that's a good way to think about lineup construction, folks. Is like Baltimore stacks with like Najee Harris in them is maybe not, necessarily an optimal thing. Because if Baltimore's going off, is Najee Harris getting the ball a bunch? Like probably not.
Right. Unless it's some sort of situation where Najee is actually in control for Pittsburgh and Baltimore's coming from behind, which seems pretty unlikely. Maybe that's a large field play. It's not something you
I
would
was just
not something you build in small field.
Najee Harris in control of the slate, in control of the game.
Hey man, we're trying to talk it
Oh,
through all situations for everyone here.
I
But
know, I know.
let's talk about the receivers now for Baltimore, right? So Zay Flowers is out, unfortunately. Very unfortunate timing on his knee injury. Sounds like he's super questionable to even return next week if they make it that far. So we have Rashad Bateman elevated to wide receiver one, and he's been good this year. He's been good this year. The biggest question, and it's hard to figure out, and the beats aren't really sure about the situation, is who fills in at number two. Because last week, well, let's go back 3 weeks. Before 3 weeks ago, Nelson Aguilar was the locked in wide receiver three for Baltimore. saw 40-50% of the snaps in some games, and then he got a concussion, missed 2 games, was fully healthy going into last week, off the injury report, cleared concussion protocol, then was a healthy scratch. Then Zay Flowers gets hurt, and as a result, Tylan Wallace steps in to Zay Flowers' role. And Jeff Zreback, who's probably one of the most tuned in beat reporters for any team, but he said something along the lines of it was probably a special teams thing. They didn't really need the win. They didn't need Aguilar and give him one more week to rest up from his concussion. So I would guess Jack Aguilar's back as the wide receiver 2 here, but it really is fluid, right? If he's falling behind Tylan Wallace, I mean, and the thing is, no one really knows, and so both their ownerships are pretty much in check.
Yeah, and I think to contrast this with the previous ones we talked about, where we kind of knew which receivers played outside and slot and could predict where the opportunities are. I'm just looking. I mean, Zay Flowers lines up everywhere because he does everything. So it's very difficult to project. Like, are they going to put one guy in that role or like? So yeah, I'm with you, man. I don't. I mean, do you have a strong lean on who you would pick at it? Like, just say for a small field lineup, like if you're going to pick a pivot on a Ravens pass catcher, wide receiver, do you have one, or is it just like you say, you know what, this we're not going to know. This is like a large field only kind of pivot.
I think it would still be Aguilar just because he's produced in the past. When he's on the field, he has gotten targets for the Ravens this year. You can't say the same for Wallace, especially last week. He ran like 28 routes and just saw a handful of targets. Mostly was out there running cardio. So I would think Aguilar, because even if he plays less than Wallace, there's still a good chance he sees more targets. So I think unless there's some weird thing going on with Aguilar and he's inactive again for some reason, I think he's probably easily to play over Wallace to me. But the situation is so fluid, you have to mix both guys in if you're making multiple lineups.
Yeah, I also just wonder if, I mean, again, the tight ends are just going to get even more slot reps, and they already get them even when Flowers is out there. So, yeah, I think tight ends and Aguilar seem like kind of the, so like, if you're looking for like a lower owned play, I guess to summarize for folks is probably Aguilar and Isaiah Likely as like the 2 guys that may stand to benefit the most that aren't chalk.
I would think so too. And again, we have Andrews at roughly double the ownership of Isaiah Likely, right? And, excuse me, Jack. Isn't that what you see on FanDuel and DraftKings, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So there you go. So Likely is your pivot away from Andrews. If your lineup is all chalk and Andrews is your last spot, you can pivot down to Isaiah Likely to get a little bit different. And we mentioned it earlier, but Justice Hill does return from his concussion/illness, and he's basically unowned on the 2-game slate. He's going to be extremely popular on DraftKings in the Showdown slate because of his price tag. So depending on which slate you're playing will depend on how popular he is. But like you said earlier, Jack, I think on the 2-gamer, one of the easier low-owned plays that we have to click in just because of his pass catching upside.
Yeah, I mean, and who's to say he won't get more targets with Zay Flowers being out, right? So that's another one. Yeah, and like you said, that is a backup running back spot that does look good. Like, can he outscore Jalen Warren? Like, sure, I think so. With the team total, with the opportunities, with the missing Flowers. So unlike the Jerome Bettis upside of who was that? Gus Bus? Yeah. So Hill looks like a good. And is the price good on DraftKings too for Hill? I don't remember what it is.
Yeah, 4,500 on DK, so super good.
Yeah. Okay.
So there we go. All right, so that'll do it for team by team. We'll move on to some strategies for the 2-gamer. Just some scheduling and some programming notes. Jack and I will be back some point tomorrow morning with another live stream breaking down tomorrow's 3 games. And then I will post the typical pre-recorded Monday Night Football Showdown preview video Monday, probably late Monday morning. So be on the lookout for that. If you're not already, make sure you subscribe to the channel here on YouTube. It's free to do so. That way you get notified whenever we go live or upload those videos. We'll be doing that for every day of the postseason. So we'd love to have you on board. Again, we're here for another 10, 15, 20 minutes, depending on the number of questions we get. So how long we stay is how many questions we get from you guys. So if you have questions about the slate, betting, DFS, go ahead and throw it in the chat. We will answer it here live. Now, Jack, I will admit I haven't done, I wouldn't even say a ton, but really any of the 6-game work, looking at all 6 games on a single slate, because Power in the chat says on the 6-gamer, would you rather go with Herbert and Higbee or Nix and Likely? And again, it's tough to know without the rest of your lineup, right? Because really, Power, if you're playing the 6-gamer, you want to stack your team, and if you have Nix, you probably want 1 or 2 of his pass catchers as well. But just in general, Jack, I would say Likely is such a powerful tight end overall this weekend, especially compared to Higbee, who's going to split reps with other tight ends from the Rams. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think it's likely. And I think, would you say for folks playing the 6 gamer, you almost treat it more like a main slate, right? Where you just kind of build the 3x1s. You don't really worry so much about like leaving salary and overstacking and things like that.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. I think, 3x1, maybe 3x2. If you're playing like a Baltimore or a Buffalo 4x1 or 4x0 is totally fine as well. But yeah, those are the types of stacks you should be targeting on the 6 gamer. So, as I said, no underperforming wide receivers for this slate. We do have one for tomorrow's Sunday game, so make sure you tune in tomorrow to see who that is. And we have two for the Monday night slate, which I'm super excited about with a big ticket on deck. All right, let's talk about some 2 game strategies, Jack. Low owned players, mega stacking, leaving salary. This is the part that most people tune in for. Let's talk about low owned plays at each position. We start at quarterback, Russell Wilson, and then CJ Stroud is he's right on that 20% mark. But Russ especially. Tommy DeVito rule tells us that we have to play Russell Wilson today, and I could see it as a 10-point dog. If the other game busts or is low scoring, if Derrick Henry gets all the touchdowns for Baltimore, Pittsburgh is likely going to have to throw in this game. So are you mixing Russ into your mass multi-entry player pool?
Yeah, I think so. And it's especially just with Lamar being appropriately priced on
Yeah,
both
true.
sites. I mean, he really does have to hit. So yeah, I think you play him. Yeah, it's not a great play, but it certainly checks the box of a low end play that you can make.
And that's the thing, right? So Russ Wilson is $1,800 cheaper than Lamar on FanDuel, and he is $2,700 cheaper than Lamar on DraftKings. So that price savings could come into effect, especially if like mix in Nico, McConkey, Henry, those types of guys go off. You might need that salary savings, even if Lamar does slightly outscore Russell Wilson. Um,
Can you remind me on DraftKings? I think like Stroud is like the same price almost, right? Right? Is he like really cheap?
yeah, Stroud is 5,500. So I mean, I would just much rather play
So
Stroud for sure.
I, I think. I mean, do you agree? Like, I feel like Russell Wilson is a better play on DraftKings just because he's the same price as CJ Stroud. He certainly could outscore CJ Stroud, and
True.
you get that massive savings over Lamar. Whereas on FanDuel, it's like 1,800 is a little closer, a little. I think probably a little tougher for him.
I think that's I think that's probably fair. That is probably fair. I see someone in the chat. Byron says the volume on my mic is low. It's as loud as it can get, so I'll just talk a little bit louder for you guys. The Deuce says can't wait for Lamar to go for 60 and the Pitt D being optimal with a pick six. Jack, defense versus quarterbacks, one of our favorite ways to get different on short games.
Yeah, again, I think you can't try to predict the outcome, but these are, I don't know if we have any stats handy on the divisional thing, but like, I think generally third divisional games are always kind of, they're more heavily contested when one of the teams isn't just horrific. Yeah, there's definitely lots of outcomes here where Lamar does struggle without his best receiver, in that rematch. So I think a defense versus Lamar certainly seems like a play that could win today, and it would be unique.
PD in the chat says, "Do you think you have to pay up for Lamar?" So for our viewers out there who are playing just one lineup and they want the best possible lineup they can build, I assume it's single entry. It's probably medium, probably large field. Uh, but what is your advice to them, Jack? I think you almost have to just overstack Baltimore, play Lamar plus 4 or 5 Ravens, and then we have Deontay. We have a couple other low owned guys. We have Nelson Aguilar. I think that's got to be the way. If you're building multiple lineups, yes, you can mix in Chargers Houston game. You can mix in Russ Wilson. But I think for the people out there with one lineup, overstacking Baltimore is probably the best play.
Yeah, I mean, we did identify some cheap guys that we know probably get some opportunity there, and yeah, I think there's just enough value on the slate today that for a small field lineup, Lamar makes a lot of sense. And I think especially on DraftKings, I wouldn't surprise if he gets cheated a fair amount.
Mm.
I mean, I don't know what we have him at, but like, he's not going to go 80%, right? He probably goes 40,
Yeah,
45.
I think that's what we have him right now, 40-ish%, which
Yeah.
to me is a bit of a bargain when you look at the rest of the
Right.
slate.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
So, um, has the thought crossed your mind of going 150 Lamar on FanDuel, or are you going to spread it out, or maybe even fade Lamar? Have you considered either one yet?
Man. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to do with this one yet. Yeah, I don't know, man. I usually like, if I haven't built already, I like to do the video and then try to decide. But I think honestly, any of that stuff is okay today. Um, I don't know. Are you having me today or no?
I'm not mass multi entering today. I'm just entering small field lineups and mostly myself. I'm trying to get another 4 4 4 4 4 4s. Yeah, the 4K ticket I have on Monday. I'm trying to get another one of those. So I'll be hunting those tickets, and that's mostly small field variety. So I don't know. I think if I had to lean, it would lean towards playing all Lamar. But again, the third divisional matchup is pretty scary, and it's not something that really is talked about that much.
I think I just can't shake the feeling that if Baltimore just fails and it's like a gross, 16 to 13 game, that it just could be like a wide open chaos slate and like a lineup with like 5K salary left could win. So I don't know. I'll probably be donating with a bunch of those lineups today at the end of the day, but we'll see. We'll see where I get to.
Young native Tino is asking about tomorrow's games, and just to be honest, Tino, we haven't looked at him too much yet. We're going to answer these types of questions on tomorrow's show. But he does have a question about the Broncos and Allen. He said the Broncos shut down Josh Allen last year. Can they do it again this year? Jack, I would say everything's possible, but I know tomorrow's slate looks extremely fun, and the Broncos have a good defense, but Vegas and the betting markets would think otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, I read something that Denver has struggled a lot with elite offenses, even though their stats overall are good. Like they kind of just beat up on bad teams. So yeah, I don't know. That I probably am not going to be fading Josh Allen tomorrow. I'll say that.
I think that's fair. All right, other low-owned players. We talked about quarterback, running back. We've talked about Justice Hills being one of the better low-owned plays on the slate. At receiver, this is where it gets gross. These are the low-owned guys. Calvin Austin. We've talked about Nelson Aguilar and Tylan Wallace. For Houston, we've talked about John Mechie and Deontay Johnson. I don't think I would go beyond those two guys. I don't think they're going to rotate Robert Woods and Xavier Hutchinson that much in this game. And then we talked about Chark and Darius Davis. So, Jack, lots of cheaper guys who could all put up zeros, but have the chance all at low ownership at cheap price tags to help fit us in one more stud and differentiate the rest of our lineups.
Yeah, I mean, let me know if you. I think this is the best play today if you're trying to get different is these low owned receivers because they're generally like they're not guys that are going to fall in the end zone for one catch. Like they're generally guys that actually have some speed and will get some opportunities on the outside to get on the field. So yeah, I think these are kind of players that, and I think you said a couple of them are like going to be really popular on Showdown too, right? Which is another indicator that like they're not truly garbage plays. They're
True.
just not needed to build lineups in a two gamer.
That's true. That is very true. Yeah, Calvin Austin, he's appropriately priced in Showdown. He won't be popular there. But Aguilar and Wallace will see 15% plus ownership. Mechie and Deontay Johnson, I combine their names. Mechie and Deontay will be popular. And then DJ Chark will be extremely popular on DraftKings Showdown. So, yeah, that is a great way to think about it for sure. And then at tight end, likely is going to be under 20% likely on FanDuel, no pun intended. Dalton Schultz will be as well, and then Will Dissly will be unpopular on both sides. So we have three low-owned tight ends if you're playing on FanDuel to choose from, and again, this seems like another great spot.
Yeah, it's just that I mean, holistically, like the ownership today is quite condensed, right? And we see that when the pricing is a little bit soft. So we have teams that don't have a lot of like super expensive players, and like Zay Flowers being out is that was an expensive guy that's gone. So there's an opportunity here where you see really concentrated ownership, and that's why we're seeing these like actually reasonable players going low owned.
I think so too. So, how many are you looking to mix in, Jack? People are asking about classic slate strategies in the chat here. And again, our daily plug is up, by the way. Our writer Bismo ran through all the slate thoughts and lineup strategies for all the slates today. So make sure you go read that after you watch this video. 1 to 3 low owned plays. It's not like a slate where we have super gross low owned plays. I think there's a slate, Jack, where you want at least one, but probably two in large field. And I wouldn't even mind three just based on the guys that we have. It's not. There was a slate a couple times ago where you and I came on here where like you really shouldn't play any low owned guys. I don't think it's the case here.
No, that was crazy. Actually, we're that's like the opposite. There's a lot here. I mean, again, I think this is you can like use your brain on these guys, and if it's guys like Deontay Johnson, Nelson Aguilar, who actually DJ Chark, who can actually have upside, they don't have like 7 point upside. There's no reason you can't play multiple of those guys in the same lineup. For small field, do you think is this your clear pivot like? Playing a low owned pass catcher is like the primary way to get different today.
I think it has to be Aguilar and Deontay are the two favorites of the group, but then Chark and Calvin Austin and Darius Davis and Mechie and those guys are right there as well. So yeah, I think so. It's got to be. Tank in the chat says everyone's talking about likely. I don't think he goes under owned. And Jack, that's certainly possible, right? Is we're looking at purely projections when we project these guys. It's possible that he gets steamed up just from people talking about him.
Yep, yeah, it's possible.
And by the way, he will be popular on DraftKings. Just to be clear, it's FanDuel in his pricing where he'll go under owned. So Tank, I agree with you on DraftKings, but FanDuel, Jack, is where the pricing actually matters.
Yeah, and then we always talk about those opportunities where like a guy is high owned on one site, not in the other, and that means it's a generally good high risk play to get more of that player.
Yep, exactly. Byron says real quick, missed the ownership on quarterbacks. So we have Lamar at like 40 to 50. We have Herbert in there at like 30, and then CJ Stroud around 20, and then Russ Wilson's around 10. That sound right, Jack, on both sides?
Yep.
So there you go. So Lamar, then Herbert, then Stroud, then Wilson. Four like distinct tiers for these guys. Um, all right, let's talk about mega stacking and just overstacking in general here. So, as we said, the most obvious way is to play 4, 5, 6 Ravens in a lineup, especially on DraftKings, playing 0 to 2 Steelers. But the other game, are you 4-2 stacking, 4-3 stacking, 3-1? What is your stacking requirements and/or limitations for Chargers and Houston?
I think you have to allow it because just the way Baltimore Pittsburgh could work out, again, if Baltimore crushes them and Derrick Henry has 30 touches and 50 points, right? Like he could be him and a defense could be the only optimum players from that game. Or if that game is just a sludgy game because Lamar struggles, whatever, right? So I think you have to allow those kind of builds because you could still have a lineup where like the Ravens clobber the Steelers as the betting markets expect, but a 4-2 stack is optimal from the other game. But yeah, I'm with you. I think the overstacking Ravens seems like one question for you on that. When I do overstacking, I like it more when you have like a primary pass catcher is going to get a lot of looks,
True.
and then you have like maybe one other lone guy you can rotate through. For Baltimore, like, do you think is it Bateman or like is it Andrews, or would you just let it mash up like whatever an optimizer wants? Like, what are your thoughts on how to overstack Baltimore?
That's a great question because normally you would like let's say Houston, right? You would anchor Nico in most of his lineups, right?
Yep,
Maybe Schultz.
you got it.
Um, but for Baltimore, I think I would anchor, and when we say anchor, we have a feature in our lineup builder where you can click players on a team, and anytime you stack that team, at least one of those players have to be involved in the stack. I think for Baltimore, if I'm stacking, obviously I want to overstack it, right? And so I think I'm going to include at least one of Andrews or Bateman in all of those. Yes, could Lamar get there in a 4-0, 5-0 stack with Aguilar and Tylan Wallace and Isaiah Likely and Justice Hill? Yes, it seems super, super unlikely, and I'd be happy just to miss out on that if it hits and just get more lineups to have either Andrews or Bateman, and probably a lot with both.
Okay, yep, that makes sense. And you read my mind. Yeah, it's the anchor thing. I like to usually like anchor two guys and then let it rotate. Thoughts on the? I think we say this every time. The Lamar Henry stack. I mean, do you let it happen? Do you try to get a lot of it? Like, do you don't like it today? What are your thoughts?
Impeccable timing because El Bumshack in the chat just said, "What about Lamar with Henry Smallfield?" Yeah,
Look at that. I didn't even look. I didn't
see,
even look.
see, everyone knows how these small slates will work now. I think you have to, right? Just because of their massive team total. If the other game is low scoring, it's so possible. And I think that actually, Jack, just has a high floor in general for small field. You play Lamar Henry,
Yeah.
you're basically getting every touchdown, every point that Baltimore scores, which automatically, boosts your floor a little bit. So I like it.
Yeah, makes sense to me.
All right, guys, that'll about do it. Let's get final questions here. Final 2-3 minutes. Let's talk about specific showdown strategies, Jack. I'll just tell you some things that stuck out to me on both of these two games. Quentin Johnston, 2% captain. Of course, that will never work out, but I think we have to at least give it a shot in large field on DK. And we mentioned the values on DraftKings. We look down here, I have it pulled up on screen. DJ Chark is only $1,200. Darius Davis is $2,400, by the way. Gus Edwards is $2,000. So if you think about him, Deontay Johnson, we mentioned earlier, he is $3,000. So these guys will get some play. Any thoughts about this game on FanDuel?
Yeah, I mean, just the probably running backs are very low for a game with a 41 total. I'm just looking at Fantasy Labs, but they have open 44 down to 41, so trending down pretty low. And we have Mixon 12%, Dobbins 4%
At MVP, right?
MVP.
Yeah.
So those are just like you can play those guys in small field or large field. I think those are great plays off of the super chalky quarterbacks and Collins. But I guess as far as low, we talked about the low end guys, right? Deontay, and the secondary receivers on the Chargers and the Texans would also allow you to just eat the chalky MVP. So honestly, it's a pretty good one. There's a lot of ways you could go.
Yeah, because as popular, and I say popular, I mean like 15% plus on DraftKings, as these guys are, they won't be nearly as popular on FanDuel because of the pricing, the half-point PPR scoring, the need for only 5 roster spots. So guys like Deontay and Chark and them, way lower owned on FanDuel. So Good to get those guys over there if you're playing there. And then if we look at the final showdown slate of the day, it's Pittsburgh and Baltimore at 8:30. No, it's at 8. Sorry, at 8. Um, the first thing that stood out to me, Jack, was George Pickens is extremely low owned, and obviously has not been great lately, but he has massive upside, and he was like 2 or 3% captain in our projected ownership on DraftKings. A little bit higher on FanDuel with the flex, but not even high in flex on DraftKings. So, I mean, I'm sure he'll go like 2 for 20, but I think that's something we got to take a shot on.
Yeah, and in the game Pittsburgh won against Baltimore, he I think he had like he only had like 90 yards, but he had 9 catches, bunch of targets. Certainly seems like a guy that will get a lot of opportunities, whether they're competitive or losing. Right, he's going to get a lot of opportunities in this game. I'm sure. I mean, it's going to be the Lamar Henry show. I mean, we did talk about it. I think the same thing you said about the DraftKings to FanDuel dynamic, where these pass catchers go lower on FanDuel, applies to this game as well. And again, these pass catchers we're talking about are not like tight end threes who we're hoping they fall in the end zone. These are actual wide receivers who can get some points. I think you can probably default to just eat Lamar on FanDuel and then play 1 or 2 depending on your contest size of these lower on pass catchers is probably the easiest way to go.
Totally agree. I don't think there's a need in small field, especially on both sites in this game, to get really that different at captain. Yes, a lot of the field is going to have Lamar, and a lot of the field is going to have Derrick Henry to a lesser extent. But yeah, there's so many low owned guys that we can mix in that it's easy to just lock one of those guys and then just rotate these guys in and hope we get the right combo. I'd much prefer that, I think, in this game, in this environment, than playing. I know I just said it, but like George Pickens or Bateman or Andrews or something at captain. That really does seem like the way to go. But obviously, you could feel differently, you out there, the viewers, if you have a different risk tolerance or depending on the contest that you're playing. All right, Jack, that'll do it for this video. You have any final thoughts for these 2 games?
No, I think it's as normal. I feel better about it after going through it with you than I did when I woke up this morning. But yeah, I think it's a decent one. Again, for folks, remember to always late swap. I think you can look at some of our recent videos right to the end. We go more into detail about that. And then we'll see you tomorrow to do this again. Hopefully, we have a screenshot from something.
Yes, let's get it. 2 final questions. I'll answer them rapid fire. Sass says, if Mechie doesn't play, does Woods straight up replace him? Mechie is expected to play, by the way. If he does not, for some reason, Deontay, I think, will be the number 2. And then Woods and Hutchinson, historically, and when I say historically, I mean like the last 6 weeks, have when Mechie's been out, they've kind of rotated. So I think it'll be a combo between Hutchinson and Woods if Mechie is somehow out. John says, Rams or Texans D on the 6th gamer. I haven't thought that far ahead. I'll say Houston for you, buddy. All right, guys, that'll do it. Jack is at DFS_magic_ on Twitter. I'm at Brian Jester FF. We're at Occupy Fantasy. OccupyFantasy.com is where you can get all of our models, our write-ups, and our ownership, and our lineup builder to help you build for these showdowns and short slates. Good luck. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. That way you get notified when we go live tomorrow to break down tomorrow's wildcard 3-gamer on Sunday. So for Jack, I'm Brian. Thanks for listening, and good luck.